Have you ever wondered how the wisest man in history would invest his wealth? I'm not talking about Musk, Bezos, Buffett, Gates, or Zuckerberg. And do you know where the principles of due diligence, long-term outlook, diversification, and correlation in investing originates? Imagine King Solomon, renowned for his wealth and wisdom, a figure whose riches surpassed the sands of the seashore, yet whose keen insight was even more profound. Have you ever wondered what strategies he used in growing his wealth? What secrets might lie within his approach to investing? Intriguing, isn't it? Let's delve into the world of King Solomon and uncover the secrets of his wisdom in investing. Investing. It's a term that's often misunderstood or even feared. It can seem pretty daunting, right? It's like diving into a big pool of uncertainty. People often think of it as a risky game, where you either hit the jackpot or lose everything. You've probably heard stories of folks striking it rich overnight or losing their savings in one bad deal. But here's the thing, that's not the whole story. Seeing investing as just a quick way to make a buck is like focusing on one tree and missing the whole forest. It's actually more like planting seeds and watching them grow over time. It takes patience, strategy, and knowing your stuff to make it work. Even though we know this, a lot of folks still go for those quick, risky bets. They're tempted by the promise of fast cash, but they don't realize that those flashy wins don't usually last long. Plus, many folks don't even know the basics of investing for the long haul. They miss out on chances to grow their money because they're not clued in on the right moves. So, here we are, stuck in a bit of a pickle. Investing is misunderstood, lots of people go for the fast and risky stuff, and not many know how to play the long game. It's a recipe for confusion and maybe even losing out on some cash. But what if there's a better way? What if we could learn from the smart folks who came before us? King Solomon, even though he lived a long time ago, still has some smart ideas about investing. You might think it's strange to take money advice from an ancient king, but hear me out. When we look at what he said, we find out it's actually pretty helpful even now. First off, let's talk about being patient. Solomon once said, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." Basically, he's saying it's better to wait for good things to happen instead of rushing into stuff. This is like how experts today say investing isn't about quick wins, it's about playing the long game. So, even before Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett, and Charlie Munger, to name a few, King Solomon stood as the original proponent of long-term investing. When you plan carefully and put in the effort, good things happen. But if you try to skip steps or take the easy road, you'll probably end up disappointed. This is where the importance of doing your due diligence comes in. Then, there's diversification. Solomon thought it was smart to spread your money around instead of putting it all in one place. He said, "Divide your portion to 7, or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth." This is still a big rule in investing today. It's like not putting all your candy in one bag in case you drop it. How about ethical and impact investing? In one of Solomon's principles, being fair, honest, and ethical consideration is a big deal. Proverbs 16:11 states, "Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making." This translates to thinking about where you put your money, making sure it's in line with what's good for people, the planet, and ethical values. Lastly, Solomon knew that making money takes time. He said, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow." This reminds us to focus on slow and steady growth instead of trying to get rich quick. This suggests that wealth obtained quickly or through dishonest means is likely to diminish over time, while wealth accumulated gradually and through honest work tends to grow. These ideas might be old, but they're still gold. They've been around for ages, and they're just as true now as they were back then. So maybe we can learn a thing or two from King Solomon when it comes to handling our money. So, how can we use the old school smarts of King Solomon to help with our investing nowadays? Imagine this. You're in a dusty old library, surrounded by old books smelling like leather and filled with ancient secrets. You spot one book with shiny gold letters on its cover, The Wisdom of Solomon. You open it up, and the first thing you see is a famous saying, "Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land." This means spreading your money out over different things, just like Solomon said. If something goes wrong with one, you've still got others to fall back on. Let's listen to an interview with CPA Robert Katz in CBN on how he discovered and applied this principle in investing.
Solomon, major premise of Solomon, what did he say? I know you quoted from Ecclesiastes.
Well, I get a lot of, as a CPA, a lot of people ask me about investment advice, and for any question I get, I usually turn to Scripture. And in Ecclesiastes, why not go to the richest and wisest man that ever lived?
Yeah.
And he tells us clearly, divide your holdings into portions of 7. Probably the first recorded reference to diversification.
Yeah.
But the question was, and he's not around to answer, what are the 7 asset classes you're talking about?
All right.
Because I absolutely believe him. Well, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I'm reading this obscure journal, the Journal of Indexes.
Yeah.
And I find this article by this professor at BYU who's spent his whole life studying portfolio combinations. And he's tested them for 38 years. And he's every combination. And he, after all of this study and analysis and scientific work, came up with the conclusion that the portfolio with the highest return and the lowest standard risk, standard deviation for risk, was a 7 asset class portfolio.
You're kidding, is that
When
right?
I read it, I said, Ecclesiastes 11:2 and 3 just immediately came to me. Here this man's confirming 3,000 years later what Solomon told us 3,000 years earlier.
So once you got the 7, what do you do with them?
Well, you divide them, as Solomon said. It's funny because he looked at different weightings and he found exactly what Solomon said to be true, divided equally into these 7 portions. Now, the portions he came up with were large cap stocks, small cap stocks, foreign, real estate, commodity, cash, and bonds. And he studied these and multiple combinations, but he found that if you divide it equally, like Solomon said, because of correlation, that randomness, over a long period of time, again, it gives you the highest yield with the lowest amount of risk. And it was a fascinating study, but what was so fascinating is how it confirmed Scripture, which is just wonderful to me.
Isn't that marvelous?
In a panic, no question, correlation comes to 1. And correlation is randomness. You want things that don't move in the same direction. And you want it as close to 0 as possible. In normal times, for the last 38 years, this 7 asset class was like 0.12, very low correlation. In panic and fear, correlation goes to 1. But this, these aren't the end times. These are hard times, but they will come to pass like every other recession. And actually, now's the time to be investing.
I think that.
Warren Buffett's been overquoted with, you invest when everybody else is fearful, but there's a lot of truth to that. In the last 10 years, this is probably one of the absolute prime times to get into the market as a long-term investor.
Sure.
Diversified.
What else did Solomon say besides that you quoted, besides dividing your assets into 7 portions?
The interesting thing about it is, if you go back, a couple of interesting things. If you go through Scripture, you'll find a lot of these 7 asset classes in a similar form in Kings and I think Chronicles, where it talks about exactly what Solomon held. And they're very similar, and I mentioned in my book, to the 7 asset classes.
What did he hold?
Oh, I'm sure he held a lot of large cap companies and small companies. He had great commodity holdings, a lot of real estate holdings, and the equivalent, whatever the equivalent of cash and notes and bonds were back then, you find references to those. So all 7, or almost all 7, if not all 7, Solomon held those. He understood. But what he also, I find the first reference ever in recorded time, he talks about correlation. You don't know what disaster is going to come upon the land.
That's right.
To me, that's correlation. He's telling us, look, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you want your assets correlated. And again, this is 3,000 years ago. And, it's wonderful to have all this modern day science confirming it, but it's fascinating and amazing to me that the answer was right there. Like every other answer, if you go to Scripture, you're going to find it.
Ecclesiastes, a book of wisdom.
But Solomon's wisdom doesn't stop there. There's another saying in the book that goes like this: whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. This means being patient and thinking about the long run when it comes to making money. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about taking your time and watching your money grow. And here's one more nugget of wisdom. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. This is a fancy way of saying smart investors don't freak out when the market gets rocky. They stick to their plan and wait for things to settle down. Now, even though Solomon wasn't exactly a stock trader, we can still learn a lot from him. It's not about copying his exact moves, but adopting his way of thinking, being patient, careful, and spreading out our investments. Our world might be way different from Solomon's time, but his wisdom still holds up today. It's like having an ancient map to guide us through the crazy maze of modern investing. So, by following King Solomon's lead, we might just end up a little wiser, and maybe even a little wealthier too. As we've learned, the wisdom of Solomon still holds true today, even in our complicated world of investing. This old king, known for his smarts, teaches us valuable lessons for handling money. Let's go over what we've talked about. First, we talked about how important it is to understand where we're putting our money, just like Solomon understood his kingdom. Being clueless about your finances won't do you any favors. Then, we looked at diversification, which means spreading your investments out. Solomon did this by having lots of different sources of income. It's a smart move that can lower your risk and boost your chances of making money. We also talked about patience. Solomon knew that getting rich quick usually ends in trouble. It's better to take your time and watch your money grow steadily. Lastly, we touched on the idea of ethical investing. Solomon believed that our money choices should help not just us, but also our community. By making thoughtful investments, we're following in his footsteps. These principles from Solomon aren't just nice ideas, they're practical rules we can use. They teach us to be smart, diverse, patient, and ethical with our money. And if we follow them, we can build a better financial future for ourselves. So, let's take these lessons from King Solomon and put them into action in our own lives. Let's invest wisely, be patient, and think about how our choices affect others. Remember, as Solomon once said, that the wise save the best for later, but fools gobble it all up. So don't rush your investments. Let them grow over time. Now that we've uncovered the wisdom of King Solomon, it's time to hear from you. What nuggets of wisdom have you gleaned from this ancient king's investment strategy? How will you apply Solomon's wisdom in your own financial journey? Don't hold back. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. Let's continue this journey of wisdom together. Until next time, keep an eye out for a brand new way to save and invest.